I still remember the exact moment everything changed. You shouldn't get too attached to her. The words floated from the kitchen, sharp and careless, like they didn't carry any weight. But they did. They landed right in my chest and stayed there. I wasn't supposed to hear it. I was sitting on the back patio of a rented lake house, watching my grandson Noah stack stones into what he proudly called a tower of power. The late afternoon sun painted everything gold, and for a moment, it almost felt like a real family vacation. Almost. What do you mean? Noah asked, his small voice confused. I didn't turn around. I didn't breathe. I mean, his mother replied, her tone light but edged with something colder. She's just your dad's mom. It's not the same as real family, sweetheart. Something inside me went still. 3 years ago, that sentence would have shattered me. Today it confirmed everything. I smiled. Not because it didn't hurt. It did. But because I had been waiting for this. Watching. Listening. Testing. And now I knew. Grandma Abigail is my real grandma, Noah said stubbornly. I could almost hear him crossing his arms the way he always did when he felt something wasn't fair. There was a pause. Then a sigh. Noah, just go wash your hands. Dinner's almost ready. I heard his small footsteps running inside. Then silence. I stayed where I was, staring at the lake. Calm on the surface. Depths hidden underneath. That's how I had lived for the past 3 years. Hidden. Abigail? My son Daniel's voice came from behind me. You okay out here? I turned slowly, keeping my smile in place. Of course, I said. It's beautiful out here. He nodded, distracted, already halfway back inside. Good. Dinner's ready. He didn't ask what I'd heard. He didn't want to know. The truth is, none of them knew who I really was. And that was entirely my choice. 3 years earlier, when my husband Thomas died, I made a decision that would define everything that followed. I chose to disappear. Not physically, not completely, but financially, socially, emotionally. I let them believe I had nothing.
No savings.
No safety net. No options. I watched what they would do when I stopped being useful. It didn't take long. Mom, you can't stay in that house alone, Daniel had said just weeks after the funeral. His wife, Claire, sat beside him, nodding with polite concern that didn't quite reach her eyes. It's too expensive, she added. Maintenance, taxes, it's just not realistic anymore. Realistic. I remember repeating that word in my head, as if I hadn't spent decades quietly building something they never bothered to notice. As if I hadn't been planning, investing, growing, while everyone assumed I was just there. Background noise in my own life. I'll manage, I told them back then. But they insisted. They always did. Eventually, I gave in. I sold the house. What they didn't know was that I had owned 3 other properties already. What they didn't know was that my investment accounts had crossed $50 million before Thomas even got sick. What they didn't know was everything. So I moved into a modest apartment. Wore simple clothes. Stopped offering help. Stopped being needed.
And I watched.
At first, they pretended nothing had changed. Weekly calls. Occasional visits. But slowly things shifted. Calls became shorter. Visits became rare. Invitations became conditional. Oh, it's just a small dinner, Claire would say. We didn't want you to feel obligated to bring anything. Or worse, it might be a bit much for you. You know, financially. Financially, I had more money than all of them combined. And yet, I played the role. Quiet. Grateful.
Small.
Because I needed to know. Was I loved, or was I simply convenient? Back at the lake house, I stepped inside and took my usual seat at the table. Claire had already plated the food. Large portions for herself and Daniel, a carefully measured one for Noah. and a noticeably smaller one for me. Let me know if you want more, she said with a tight smile. We both knew I wasn't expected to. Daniel scrolled through his phone. Noah talked about his rock tower. I listened, observed, stored everything away. So, Grandma, Noah said suddenly, Mom says we might not visit you as much anymore. The room went still. Claire froze for a split second. Daniel looked up, frowning. Because it's far, Noah continued innocently. And gas is expensive. I felt something tighten in my chest, not because of the words, because of how easily they were said. It's okay, I told him gently. People make choices based on what they think matters. Claire cleared her throat. That's not what I meant. It's fine, I said, smiling.
And it was.
Because tomorrow, none of this would matter. That night, I lay on the uncomfortable couch they had assigned me. The same one I'd slept on during every visit. The same one that reminded me exactly where I stood in their world.
Second place. At best.
My phone buzzed softly. A message. Everything is ready. Just say when. I stared at the screen for a long moment. 3 years. 3 years of silence. 3 years of watching my own son become a stranger. 3 years of letting a woman decide my worth based on what she thought I had. My fingers moved slowly. Tomorrow, during dinner, I set the phone down and closed my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Not anger, not sadness, anticipation. Because tomorrow, the truth would come out. And when it did, everything would change. Morning came too quietly, like the world didn't yet understand what was about to happen. I woke up before everyone else, still lying on that thin, uneven couch that had become my place in their home, temporary, uncomfortable, easy to ignore. For a moment, I stayed still, listening. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of water brushing against the shore outside. 3 years ago, I would have gotten up immediately, eager to help, to prove I wasn't a burden. Now, I took my time, because I wasn't a burden. I had never been one. I just allowed them to believe I was. I sat up slowly, stretching my back, letting the stiffness settle before it faded. Funny how the body adapts, even to discomfort, when the mind has a purpose. From the hallway, I heard footsteps, light, uneven.
Noah.
He appeared in the doorway, hair messy, eyes still heavy with sleep. The moment he saw me, he smiled. Grandma Abigail, you're awake. I've been awake, I said softly. You're the one who looks like he's still dreaming. He laughed and walked over, climbing onto the couch beside me without hesitation. That simple, unfiltered affection hit me harder than anything his parents had said or done. Are we going back home today? He asked. Yes, I replied. We are. He nodded, then leaned his head against my shoulder like it was the most natural thing in the world. And for him, it was.
No calculations.
No conditions. Just connection. Can we build another rock tower sometime? He asked. I swallowed the tightness in my throat. We will, I said. As many as you want. At that moment, I made myself a promise. Whatever happened today, I wouldn't let them take this away from me. By the time Daniel and Claire came into the kitchen, I was already making coffee. Not because I had to, because I wanted to see their reaction. Claire paused in the doorway, watching me. You didn't have to do that, she said, her tone polite but edged with something else, something closer to suspicion. I know, I replied calmly. I just felt like it. Daniel glanced between us, sensing something, but not understanding it. Smells good, he muttered, pouring himself a cup. Claire didn't move right away. She kept watching me, as if trying to place something that didn't quite fit. You seem different, she said finally. I smiled slightly.
Doi.
Yes, she said, more energetic. Maybe I just slept well. That wasn't entirely a lie. For the first time in years, I had slept without the weight of uncertainty pressing on my chest. Decisions had been made. The waiting was over. We ate breakfast together, if you could call it that. Daniel scrolled through his phone again, half present. Claire picked at her food, her eyes occasionally drifting toward me. Noah talked, filling the silence with stories about imaginary kingdoms built from stones and sticks. And I watched them, not as a mother, not as a guest, but as someone seeing everything clearly for the first time. We decided to take one last walk by the lake before packing up. Claire insisted it would be good for everyone, though I suspected she simply wanted photos, something to post, something to prove. The path was narrow and lined with tall trees, their shadows stretching across the ground like quiet witnesses. For 3 years, I had played the role of someone slower, weaker, dependent. Today, I didn't. I walked at a steady pace. Not fast. Just normal. Mom, Daniel said after a few minutes, catching up beside me. You're doing okay? I'm walking, I replied. That's usually a good sign. He frowned slightly, unsure how to respond. Behind us, Claire was watching again. She didn't say anything this time, but I could feel it. Something in her was starting to shift. When we reached the lake, Noah ran ahead, immediately drawn to the water and the smooth stones scattered along the shore. Look, he shouted. Perfect building rocks. I followed him, kneeling beside him as he began constructing another tower. Careful with the base, I said. If it's not stable, everything else falls. He nodded seriously, adjusting the stones with small, precise movements. Daniel and Claire stayed back, setting up a small picnic. They had brought everything, chairs, snacks, drinks. Everything except a place for me. I didn't ask. I sat on a fallen log instead. And strangely, I didn't feel excluded. I felt detached, like I was watching a performance I already understood. Abigail, come take a picture, Claire called out. I looked up. She and Daniel were standing together, perfectly framed by the lake behind them. Noah ran over to join them. A perfect family moment, except for one detail.
Me.
I'm fine here, I said. Claire hesitated, then shrugged.
All right. They took the picture without me.
Like they always did. 3 years. Not one photo. Not one memory where I was included as part of the story. Only as background. That used to hurt. Now it just confirmed everything. Later, while Noah and I built another rock tower, Daniel approached. He really likes you, he said, watching us. He's a good boy, I replied. He is, Daniel agreed. Then, after a pause, I guess kids don't really notice things like situations. I looked at him. What kind of situations? He hesitated. You know, financial stuff. Limitations. Limitations. There it was again. I smiled faintly. No, they don't. That's something adults teach them. He didn't respond, but I saw it, the flicker of discomfort. Good. He was starting to think. Claire joined us a few minutes later, her expression carefully neutral. Noah, she said, don't get too used to this. We won't always have time for trips like this. Noah frowned.
Why?
Because life isn't just about playing, she replied. People have responsibilities. I met her eyes. And family is one of them, I said quietly. She held my gaze for a second too long. Yes, she said finally. Within reason. Of course, I replied. Within reason. But we both knew we weren't talking about the same thing anymore. On the walk back, I made my decision official. I'd like to cook dinner tonight, I said casually. Claire stopped. Cook, she repeated.
Yes.
A proper dinner. For all of us. That's not necessary, she said quickly. We were just going to order something. I insist. My tone was calm, but firm. Daniel looked between us again, clearly sensing tension. Mom, you don't have to. I want to. Silence. Claire studied me, her eyes narrowing slightly. All right, she said slowly. If you're sure. I am. That afternoon, while they rested, I drove into town alone. For 3 years, I had played the part perfectly. Cheap groceries, simple meals, careful spending. Today, I didn't. I walked into the most expensive store in the area and bought everything I wanted. Prime cuts of meat, fresh herbs, ingredients that spoke of skill, not survival. Not because I needed to prove anything, but because tonight truth would sit at the table with us. Back at the house, I cooked. Not like someone trying to impress, like someone who had nothing left to hide. Daniel came into the kitchen halfway through. That smells amazing, he said. It should, I replied. He leaned against the counter, watching me. I didn't know you cooked like this. I didn't look up. There are many things you don't know about me. That silenced him. By the time dinner was ready, everything was in place. The table, the food, the moment. Claire entered last, her eyes scanning everything. The plates, the wine, the details. This doesn't look like your usual, she said carefully.
No, irraplia.
It doesn't. We sat down. Noah smiled, excited. Daniel looked curious. Claire looked uneasy. And me? I felt calm. Completely calm. Because after tonight, there would be no more pretending. Dinner began quietly, almost deceptively normal, like the calm before a storm that only one person in the room could see coming. I watched them carefully as they took their first bites, Daniel cutting into the steak with mild curiosity, Noah immediately lighting up with excitement, and Claire pausing. She didn't even taste it right away. She looked at it first, like she was trying to calculate something invisible. This is really good, Daniel said after a moment, clearly surprised. Like restaurant good. Noah didn't bother with words. This is the best food ever, he declared, his mouth already full, completely unaware that his enthusiasm was cutting through years of quiet assumptions. Claire finally took a bite, and there it was, that subtle shift in her expression. Not just appreciation, but confusion. Where did you get all this? She asked, her voice controlled but tight. This isn't cheap. I took a slow sip of wine before answering, letting the moment stretch just enough. Sometimes, I said, you find things you weren't expecting. She didn't smile.
She didn't believe me. Good.
Daniel glanced between us again, sensing something he couldn't quite grasp. Mom, seriously, this is amazing. You've never cooked like this before. I met his eyes. Yes, I have. Silence. He blinked. What? You've just never noticed. That landed heavier than I expected. He looked down at his plate, suddenly unsure of himself. Claire set her fork down. That was the moment I knew we were done pretending. All right, she said slowly, folding her hands together. What's going on? I smiled.
Not warmly, not kindly, but honestly.
I think, I said, it's time we talked about something important. Noah looked up. Like what? I softened my voice when I answered him. About truth, sweetheart. About how sometimes people don't tell the whole story. Daniel shifted in his chair. Mom, what are you getting at? I leaned back slightly, completely at ease. For the past 3 years, I said, you've all believed something about me that wasn't true. Claire's eyes sharpened instantly. What do you mean? I continued calmly, that everything you think you know about my situation is wrong. Daniel frowned. Your situation? You mean financially? Yes. That word hung in the air like a trigger. Claire's grip tightened around her glass. What are you saying? She asked, her voice just barely steady. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached for my bag, placed it gently on the table, and took out my tablet. Slowly, deliberately. Daniel watched every movement now. Claire didn't blink. Noah just looked curious. I tapped the screen, opened a file, and turned it toward them. Take a look. Daniel leaned forward first, then froze. Claire followed, and I watched her entire world crack open in real time. No, she whispered. Daniel's face drained of color. This isn't real. It is, I said calmly. On the screen was a simple summary. Accounts, investments, assets. A number that didn't leave room for misunderstanding. $52 million. Claire actually laughed, but it wasn't humor. It was disbelief breaking into panic. This is some kind of joke, she said. It has to be.
No joke.
Daniel shook his head slowly. Mom, what is this? What am I looking at? You're looking, I said, at the truth. The silence that followed was suffocating. You've had this whole time? He asked. Yes. For how long? Long before your father died. Claire stood up, so abruptly her chair scraped loudly against the floor. That's impossible, she said sharply. You were struggling. You said. I let you believe that. I interrupted. That hit her like a slap. You lied to us, she snapped. I didn't lie, I said evenly. I just didn't correct you. Daniel looked between us, completely lost.
Why?
Why would you do that? I leaned forward slightly, my voice steady, but no longer soft. Because I needed to know who you really were. Silence.
Heavy.
Unavoidable. What does that even mean? Claire demanded. It means, I said, that when your father died, I realized something. I didn't know my own family anymore. I didn't know what mattered to you. I didn't know if I was loved or tolerated. Daniel looked like he'd been punched. That's not fair, he said quietly.
No.
I asked. Then what is fair, Daniel? Selling my house 2 weeks after your father's funeral? Suggesting I move somewhere affordable so I wouldn't be a responsibility. He didn't answer. Claire stepped in. We were trying to help you. No, I said, my tone sharpening for the first time. You were trying to manage me. That word landed exactly where it needed to. Claire's expression hardened. We included you. We brought you here. You minimized me. I cut in. You reduced me. You made me smaller, so I would fit into your version of what was convenient. That's not true. Isn't it? I gestured lightly around the table. The smaller portions. The couch instead of a bed. The comments about money. The way you slowly erased me from your life without ever saying it out loud. Daniel covered his face with his hands. Claire didn't back down. You're twisting things, she said. We treated you based on what we believed your situation was. Exactly, I replied. And that was the moment it hit her. Her expression changed, not to anger, to realization. Oh my God, she whispered. Yes, I said quietly. Exactly. Noah looked between us, confused. Why are you fighting? I reached for his hand. We're not fighting, sweetheart. We're just talking about something important. Claire was breathing faster now. You tested us, she said. I observed you. For 3 years. Daniel asked. Yes. That's insane, Claire snapped. No, I said calmly. What's insane is how quickly you accepted that I didn't matter. Silence. You never asked if I needed help, I continued. You never offered real support. You just adjusted your expectations downward until I fit somewhere manageable. That's not. And yesterday, I said, cutting her off, you told Noah I wasn't really his grandmother. The room froze. Claire's face went completely pale. Daniel turned slowly toward her. You said what? It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, I said. Noah looked scared now. Mom, he asked quietly. Claire opened her mouth, but nothing came out, because there was nothing to defend. I leaned back again, completely composed. That, I said, was the moment I knew the test was over. Daniel's voice was barely above a whisper. And we failed. I didn't hesitate. Yes. Claire shook her head, tears forming now. This is cruel. You set us up. No, I said. I gave you the freedom to show me who you are when there was nothing to gain. That's not fair. Neither is teaching a child that love depends on value. That broke her. She took a step back, then another. Her breathing became uneven, her hands trembling. I need, she started. And then she collapsed, just like that. Her body hit the floor with a dull, final sound that echoed through the room. Noah gasped. Mom. Daniel rushed to her side instantly, panic replacing everything else. Claire. Claire, wake up. I didn't move. I sat there, watching.
Calm.
After 3 years of being invisible, I had finally become impossible to ignore. Is she okay? Noah asked, his voice small. She will be, I said quietly. Daniel looked up at me, his face pale, shaken, completely lost. What happens now? He asked. I picked up my glass, took one slow sip, and met his eyes. Now, I said, we talk about the future. Claire came back to consciousness slowly, like someone rising from deep water, disoriented and unprepared for what waited above the surface. Daniel was kneeling beside her, one hand supporting her shoulder, the other gripping hers too tightly, as if letting go might make everything worse. Noah hovered nearby, wide-eyed and silent, sensing the shift but not understanding it. I had moved to the living room, giving them space but not distance. I wanted them to feel it. The weight of truth doesn't need proximity. It fills every corner on its own. What happened? Claire whispered, blinking rapidly as the room came back into focus. You fainted, Daniel said softly. After Mom told us. Claire's eyes snapped to me immediately. Not confused anymore. Not uncertain. Just aware. The memory hit her all at once. I could see it in the way her posture stiffened, the way her fingers curled into the fabric of her sleeve. The money, she said flatly. Yes, I replied. The money. Silence again. Not the soft kind. The kind that presses on your ears. Daniel helped her sit up properly, guiding her to one of the chairs. Noah slowly backed away, returning to his toys, though his attention stayed fixed on us. Children always understand more than adults think. They just don't have the words yet. I need to understand, Daniel said finally, his voice rough. All of this, the past 3 years, you just watched us? I watched, I said. I listened. I learned. Claire shook her head slowly, still pale.
Why?
Why would you do something like this? I studied her for a moment before answering. Because I needed to know if I was loved or if I was only tolerated when I was useful. That's not, she started, but her voice broke before the sentence could form. It is, I said, not raising my voice. You just didn't expect to be seen. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like it might offer him an escape. So everything, the apartment, the struggles, the way you acted, was real, I interrupted gently. Just not in the way you thought. You let us believe you had nothing, he said. I let you show me what that meant to you. Claire let out a hollow laugh, shaking her head again. This is insane. You manipulated us. I gave you space, I replied, and you filled it with your choices. That hit harder than any accusation. She looked at me then, really looked, not as an inconvenience or an obligation, but as someone she had completely misjudged. What happens now? she asked quietly. That was the question I had been waiting for. I stood up slowly, walked to my bag, and took out a large envelope.
Thick.
Organized. Final. I've already decided, I said, placing it on the table. Daniel looked up sharply. Decided what? The future. Claire's breath caught. I opened the envelope and took out the first document, placing it in front of them. My will. Neither of them touched it at first. Daniel spoke carefully. Mom, we don't need to. You do, I said, because this doesn't concern just me anymore. I glanced briefly toward Noah, then back at them. This concerns him. That shifted everything. Claire leaned forward slightly now, her earlier panic transforming into something more focused. Calculating. I noticed. Of course I noticed. My entire estate, I continued, will be placed in a trust. Daniel swallowed. For Noah? Yes. Claire's fingers tightened on the edge of the table. And who controls it? Not you. The answer came immediately.
Calm.
Final. Her face drained again, but this time she didn't argue. The trust will be managed by my attorney and a financial firm. I continued. It will remain inaccessible until Noah turns 25. Daniel exhaled slowly. That's a long time. It's a necessary amount of time, I said, to ensure he becomes his own person before that kind of responsibility is placed in his hands. Claire nodded faintly, but I could see her mind moving faster now, searching for angles, possibilities. So I gave her the next part. There are conditions. That stopped everything again. What kind of conditions? Daniel asked. The kind that protect what matters, I said. I placed the second document on top of the first. Noah will only receive the full inheritance if his relationship with me remains intact.
Claire blinked.
What? If I see any attempt to distance him from me, I continued, my voice steady, any manipulation, any effort to redefine my place in his life, the entire amount will be redirected. To where? Daniel asked quietly. Charity. The word landed like a verdict. Claire stared at me, stunned. You can't be serious. I am. That's extreme, she said.
No, Iraplia.
What's extreme is spending 3 years teaching a child that his grandmother doesn't matter. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Daniel rubbed his face again, overwhelmed. So, you're saying if we don't do everything right, I'm saying, I interrupted, that your actions will finally have consequences. Claire leaned back, her composure cracking again. This is blackmail. This is accountability. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Daniel looked at me, eyes searching. And us? Where do we fit into this? I held his gaze. You don't. That hurt him.
I saw it. Good.
This isn't about rewarding you, I said. It's about protecting him. Claire let out a shaky breath. You're cutting us out completely. I'm removing your ability to control something you've already shown you don't respect. Daniel stood up, pacing now, trying to process everything at once. This is too much. This is all happening too fast. No, I said quietly. This has been happening for 3 years. You're just finally aware of it. That stopped him. Claire spoke again, softer this time. What about now? Not the future. Right now. I took a moment before answering. I'm moving. Daniel froze.
What?
I've already bought a house. About 2 hours from here. 2 hours, he repeated. Yes. Claire frowned. Why that far? So that seeing me becomes a choice, I said. Not an obligation. Daniel looked like he didn't know whether to argue or accept it. No more casual visits where I'm treated like an afterthought. I continued. No more situations where I'm included out of convenience. If you want me in your lives, you will have to show it. Claire lowered her eyes. For the first time since this began, she didn't push back. What if we try? She asked quietly. What if we change? I studied her carefully. You don't try, I said. You do. Or you don't. Daniel stopped pacing. And if we fail? I met his eyes. Then you'll spend the rest of your lives explaining to Noah why he lost everything before he even understood what it was. That broke whatever illusion remained. Claire started crying again. Quietly this time, not dramatically. Not for effect. Just real. We didn't know, she whispered. I know, I said. And if we had. If you had known, I interrupted, you would have treated me well for the wrong reasons. She nodded slowly, because she knew it was true. I stepped back slightly, creating space, not physically, but emotionally. You have tonight, I said. Talk. Decide who you want to be. Daniel looked at me, his voice barely holding together. And in the morning? In the morning, I said, you tell me if you're ready to live with the truth or without it. No one spoke after that.
No arguments. No defenses.
Just silence. The kind that forces people to finally hear themselves. And for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't the one being ignored. I didn't sleep much that night, but not for the reasons they probably thought. It wasn't guilt or doubt keeping me awake. It was clarity. The kind that only comes after a long stretch of silence, when everything finally aligns and there's nothing left to question. From the couch, I could hear faint voices through the wall separating me from Daniel and Claire's bedroom. At first, they whispered, as if lowering their volume might somehow soften reality. But truth has a way of getting louder no matter how quietly you speak around it. You can't seriously think we have a choice, Claire said at one point, her voice tense, sharp around the edges. This isn't just about the money, Daniel replied, though he didn't sound entirely convinced of his own words. Of course it is, she shot back. $52 million isn't something you just ignore. There it was. Not even an attempt to hide it anymore.
No softening, no pretending.
Just raw honesty, the kind that only appears when people are cornered. I closed my eyes, not to block them out, but to listen better. And what about Noah? Daniel asked. What about what she said about us, about how we treated her? A pause. Longer this time. We didn't treat her badly, Claire said, but even she sounded unsure. We just adjusted, based on what we knew. What we assumed, Daniel corrected quietly. Another silence. Then Claire again, softer now. Do you really think she would have done all this if we hadn't? Yes, Daniel said immediately, because she needed to know. That answer surprised me. It was the first time he had said something that felt real. I turned onto my side, staring at the faint outline of the window. The lake outside was invisible now, swallowed by darkness, but I could still feel its presence. Still.
Deep.
Unmoving. Like me. You didn't hear what you said yesterday? Daniel continued. About her not being a real grandmother? I didn't mean it like that. But you said it. That doesn't mean. It means everything, he interrupted, his voice breaking slightly. It means we've been wrong. For a long time. Silence again. But this time it was different. Not defensive. Reflective. And that mattered. Morning came slowly. Not because the sun was late, but because the house was heavy. When I stepped into the kitchen, Noah was already there again, sitting at the table with a bowl of cereal, swinging his legs just like the day before. Some things don't change, no matter how much everything else does. Morning, he said brightly. Good morning, I replied, pouring myself a cup of coffee. He watched me for a moment, then asked, Is Mom okay? I turned to him, softening immediately. She's just tired, sweetheart. Everyone was yelling, he said. I didn't like it. I know, I said gently. Sometimes adults have to say difficult things, but it doesn't mean they don't care about each other.
He thought about that.
Are you still my grandma? He asked. That question hit deeper than anything else had. I walked over, knelt beside him, and looked him straight in the eyes. I will always be your grandmother, I said, no matter what anyone says. He smiled, and just like that, everything I was doing felt justified again. Daniel came in a few minutes later. He looked different, not physically, exactly, but something in him had shifted, like a layer had been peeled back overnight. Mom, he said quietly, can we talk? I nodded and followed him outside. The air was cool, fresh, almost too clean for what we were about to say. He didn't speak right away, just stood there, hands in his pockets, staring out toward the lake. We talked all night, he said finally. I assumed. He nodded. We want to accept your terms. I didn't respond immediately, not because I was surprised, because I needed to hear more. All of them? I asked. Yes. I studied him. Why? He let out a breath. Because we don't have a choice. There it was. The wrong answer. I shook my head slightly. That's not good enough. He looked at me, confused. What do you mean? You said. I said you have a choice. I corrected. Not that you're trapped. He frowned, struggling. I don't understand. That's the problem, I said gently. If the only reason you accept my terms is because of the money, then nothing has actually changed. That hit him harder than anything I had said yesterday. He looked away again, jaw tightening. So, what do you want me to say? He asked. I want you to understand, I said. Really understand. Not just react. Silence. Then, slowly, something in him broke. I failed you, he said. Not defensive. Not forced. Just true. I felt that. More than I expected. You failed yourself, I replied quietly. You became someone who could watch his own mother be diminished and say nothing. He nodded, tears forming in his eyes. I know. And worse, I continued. You let your son learn that behavior. That made him flinch. I didn't realize it was happening, he said. You didn't want to realize, I corrected. He didn't argue. Because he couldn't. We stood there for a long moment.
No anger. No shouting.
Just truth. What do I do now? He asked finally. You prove it, I said.
How?
Not with words. Not with promises. With consistency. He nodded slowly. I can do that. I hope so, I said. Because this is your last chance. He looked at me sharply. I'm serious, Daniel. I won't go back to being invisible. Not for you. Not for anyone. I understand. I believed that he thought he did. Whether he actually did, time would decide.
Claire didn't come outside.
But when we went back in, she was sitting at the table, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, eyes red but dry. She looked up at me, and for the first time, there was no superiority in her expression. No control. Just uncertainty. I'm sorry, she said. Simple.
Direct.
But I didn't respond right away. Because apologies are easy. Change isn't. I shouldn't have said what I said to Noah, she continued. And I see now how things looked. Looked, I repeated. She swallowed. How they were. Better. Still not enough. I don't expect you to forgive me, she added quickly. Good, I said. That surprised her. Because forgiveness isn't the point, I continued. Understanding is. She nodded slowly. I'm trying. Then keep trying, I said. Consistently. We packed in silence after that.
Not awkward.
Not tense. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after something breaks, and before anything new has had time to grow. Noah stayed close to me the entire time, as if he instinctively knew something important had shifted and didn't want to lose his place in it. "Will you visit me?" he asked as we loaded the car. "I will," I said. "Promise." "I don't make promises I can't keep."
He seemed satisfied with that.
When it was time to leave, we stood by the cars for a moment. No big goodbye. No dramatic resolution.
Just a pause.
Daniel stepped forward and hugged me. Not out of obligation. Not quickly. But tightly. Like he meant it. That mattered. Claire hesitated, then stepped closer. Not a hug.
Not yet.
But closer. That also mattered. As I got into my car, I took one last look at them, at what we had been, at what we might become. Not fixed, not guaranteed, but possible. And for the first time in 3 years, that was enough. 6 months changed everything, and at the same time, not nearly enough. That was the strange part. I had expected something dramatic, something clear-cut, like a clean break or a perfect reconciliation. Instead, what we built was quieter, slower, and far more real than anything we had before. I was sitting in the sunroom of my new house when I realized it. The morning light stretched across the wooden floor, warm and steady, touching everything without asking permission. Outside, the small garden I had planted was finally starting to take shape. Rows of herbs, a few stubborn vegetables, and in the center, a patch Noah insisted on calling our kingdom. He was kneeling there now, carefully digging around a basil plant with far more seriousness than the situation required. "Not too deep," I reminded him. "You'll disturb the roots." "I know," he said, not looking up. "I'm being careful."
He was.
More careful than most adults I knew. I leaned back in my chair, watching him, letting the quiet settle around us.
No tensión. No pretending.
Just presence. That alone made everything worth it. The distance had done exactly what I intended. 2 hours was far enough that visits had to be planned. No more casual drop-ins, no more last-minute invitations where I was an afterthought. If they came, it was because they chose to. And that changed everything. Daniel came every other weekend. At first, he came alone. I knew why. It was easier for him to face me without Claire there, without the weight of her reactions, her discomfort, her pride. Those first visits were awkward, careful, like walking across thin ice. We talked about simple things at first, work, the house, Noah's school, but gradually something deeper started to return.
Not what we had before.
Something new. Something honest. "I didn't realize how much I avoided things," he admitted one afternoon while helping me fix a loose hinge in the kitchen. "It was easier to just not see it." "I know," I said. "I thought I was keeping peace," he continued, "but I was just letting things happen." I looked at him then, not as a disappointed mother, but as someone seeing the full picture for the first time. "And now?" I asked. "Now I see it," he said simply. That was all I needed. Claire took longer. Much longer. The first time she came with him, she barely spoke. Polite, careful, distant. Every word measured, every reaction controlled. She wasn't comfortable, and she didn't try to pretend she was.
Good.
I didn't want performance anymore. I wanted truth. Over time, her behavior changed. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in small, consistent ways. She stopped making passive remarks. Stopped correcting Noah when he talked about me. Stopped positioning herself as the center of every interaction. Respect came first. Warmth wasn't necessary. "She's trying," Daniel told me once during one of his solo visits. "I can see that," I replied. "She's scared," he added. "She should be," I said calmly. He didn't argue, because he knew I was right. The real change, the one that mattered most, was Noah. Without interference, without quiet corrections or subtle distancing, our relationship grew into something it should have been all along. natural, easy,
real.
He spent weekends with me now, learning things no one had ever thought to teach him before. Not because they weren't important, but because they weren't convenient. We cooked together. We worked in the garden. We talked about everything. Mom says you're really rich, he said one afternoon, completely out of nowhere, as he watered the plants with more enthusiasm than accuracy. I smiled slightly. She's not wrong. He looked up at me, thinking, does that mean you're different? That question was important, more important than he realized. No, I said. It just means I have more choices.
He considered that,
Then nodded. I like you the same, he said.
I'm glad, I replied.
Because I didn't change. And that was the truth. I had never changed. They had just finally seen me. The trust remained in place. Unchanged. Untouched. Not because I didn't believe in second chances, but because I believed in consistency. Money doesn't fix character. It reveals it. And I had already seen enough to know that safeguards weren't punishment. They were protection.
For Noah. For me.
For whatever future we were building now. One evening, after Daniel and Noah had left, I sat alone in the sunroom again, a cup of tea warming my hands as the sky slowly darkened outside. The garden was quiet, the air still, the kind of calm that doesn't need to announce itself. My phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. He asked if we can plant tomatoes next time. Also, thank you for not giving up on us. I read it twice, then set the phone down, because that was the part no one talks about. Not giving up. It would have been easier. Easier to walk away. Easier to cut them out completely, to protect myself without leaving the door open. But that wasn't what I wanted. I didn't want revenge. I wanted truth. And now I had it. Claire never sent messages like that. But she didn't need to. Her actions said enough. The way she greeted me now, directly, not as an obligation. The way she stepped back instead of controlling every situation. The way she allowed Noah to choose. That was her version of change. And I accepted it. Not fully. Not blindly. But realistically. She would never like me.
And I didn't need her to.
Respect was enough. Sometimes I thought about how different everything could have been. If I had told them the truth from the beginning. If I had never tested them. If I had just trusted. But then I remembered those 3 years. The small comments. The quiet exclusions. The way I disappeared in my own family without anyone noticing.
No.
This was necessary. Painful, yes. But necessary. Because now nothing was hidden. Nothing was assumed. Everything that existed between us was real. A week later, Noah and I stood in the garden again, this time marking out a new section for tomatoes. Right here, he said, pointing with absolute certainty. Why there? I asked. Because it gets the most sun, he replied confidently. I raised an eyebrow. And how do you know that? I watched, he said. I smiled.
Of course he did.
Then that's exactly where they go, I said. He beamed, and in that moment, I realized something simple, but powerful. He was learning, not just about plants, not just about life, but about people, about consistency, about what it means to show up. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the garden, I stood there and let the moment settle. The past wasn't erased. It never would be. But it also didn't define everything anymore. We had moved forward. Not perfectly. Not completely. But honestly. And that was more than I had hoped for. That night, as I sat by the window watching the first stars appear, I allowed myself a quiet sense of peace. Not victory. Not satisfaction. Something deeper.
Stability.
I hadn't won anything. I had simply refused to lose myself. And in doing that, I had rebuilt something real. something that couldn't be taken away by assumptions, convenience, or silence. The performance was over. The truth remained. And for the first time in years, that was enough.